in a speech, and I'm using the word loosely and incorrectly, that's been generously described as an address on his economic policy, Donald Trump laser focused on the economic issues that are of most importance to the American people. This is what he had to say. For nearly 4 years, Kamala, actually, I don't know if he pronounced it correctly, so let's give him the benefit of the doubt because he so deserves it, has cackled as the American economy has burned. Her laugh is career threatening. That's the laugh of a person with some big problems, says the person with some big problems. Meanwhile, we're told that Kamala Harris is trying to run a no substance campaign. Keep digging, corporate media. We see you. Let's dive in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Nerd Avengers. It's great to be here. It's great to see everybody, but I have to say it's especially good to see Dahlia. We haven't seen you in a very long time, so I'm very glad you're here, my friend. And I'm going to start with you. there are things to discuss, and so much is getting lost that I think every once in a while, I think it's important for us to take a step back and just remind people that as the campaign is unfolding, and again, we're living through history. This is finally we get to use this word appropriately, unprecedented. But that doesn't mean there aren't other things happening. And even though this was a while ago, I wanted to flag it and discuss it in the context of what we can expect from SCOTUS next year if the worst possible scenario unfolds, and also placing it in the context of some comments that JD Vance recently made. But I want to start with Justice Gorsuch's remarks. First of all, he was on Fox, which I don't think that that's appropriate, but it's, I guess, the least of the bad things that these justices are on the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority are doing. But I want to quote what he said in response to President Biden's, in my view, completely reasonable list of things he'd like to see in terms of Supreme Court reform. I don't think there could be too much reasonable argument. I think it didn't go far enough, but it was a reasonable place to start. And this is what Gorsuch had to say. To Americans, the independent judiciary means that when you're unpopular, you can get a fair hearing under the law and under the Constitution. If you're in the majority, you don't need judges and juries to hear you and protect your rights. You're popular. The judicial system is there for the moments when the spotlight's on you, when the government's coming after you, and don't you want a ferociously independent judge and a jury of your peers to make those decisions? Isn't that your right as an American? And so, he says, regarding reform, be careful. Dahlia, this seemed like a threat to me.
It's a little mobby, yeah?
Little mobby.
Tiny bit mobbed up. Look, he's flacking a book. Bracket the fact that the Republicans have been trying to impeach Sonia Sotomayor, right, for having a book. But apparently when he's flacking a book, it's great. And by the way, the book is a love letter to getting rid of the regulatory state, right?
Bye, Chevron.
the Chevron case in like haiku form, but it goes on for like a lot of pages. So I think that what I would say about Gorsuch is two things. One, really interesting to contrast it with remarks that Justice Elena Kagan made at the Ninth Circuit right before, where Justice Kagan was asked about court reform, specifically ethics reform, and she very Kaganishly said, like in the most small c conservative way she could say it, yeah, there needs to be some kind of enforcement mechanism. Like people need to trust the courts. And clearly it's not working to have us regulate ourselves. So I just want to like put those two next to each other in terms of like whose position is reasonable. The person who is defending a court that has the lowest popularity ratings since polling began and whose response to that is a threat, or the person who's like, dude, I'm one of the 9 people who wouldn't even take an order of bagels to my chambers that my friends sent me because it violates the ethics rules. And Mr. Super Yacht guy is still not reporting things are still surfacing. So I just think it's not the case that the justices cannot get behind this. It is the case that one justice was very comfortable saying, of course, we need ethics reform.
Yeah.
And there are clearly several others, and now we know Gorsuch is one of them, who act as though it's, you know, an existential threat to judicial independence. The other thing I want to say, and this is just a bit wonkier, but I'll say it quickly. This notion that the court exists to check varnished majority rule, it's true, right? The whole point of the court and why the framers created a court that has lifetime tenure and you can't be removed except for high crimes and misdemeanors really is a plausible argument for what we want in a court, which is to not always be popular. But that's not a defense of being unlawful. That's a defense of minority rule. And so the same court that gives you Brown v. Board or Roe v. Wade, things that might not have polled well at the time, that's one argument for why you want a structural institution that is protected, right, from harassment and threats. This isn't that. This is a defense of super yachts and RVs and paying for your grandnephew's tuition. So just be really careful when you hear justices conflate those two things and claim that both of them are judicial independence. One is judicial independence, one is just lawlessness.
Yes, and corruption. Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna try something. So if it doesn't work, oh well. Forgive me. But we had some technical difficulties, which were probably entirely my fault. But in my defense, Google hates me. Anyway, let's see how this does.
Well, we love you.
Well, thank you so much. That is very kind of you, and we'll see how you feel about that after this.
My dear friends tonight said to me, well, all these suburban women, all they care about is abortion, and they don't understand that decision is with the states now. It's not banned nationally, even if some people want it to be banned nationally. It's with the states. What do you say to suburban women out there who are marinating in this propaganda?
Well, first of all, I don't buy that, Laura. I think most suburban women care about the normal things that most Americans care about, right?
Jen Taub, there's nothing normal about women obsessing about having things like rights. What is wrong with these women who are essentially listening to Fox propaganda? Apparently,
yeah. I mean, in JD Vance's view of how women should be in the world, it just doesn't pass the Bechdel test. The bottom line here is
just explain what that is, please.
Yeah, the Bechdel test was kind of a tongue-in-cheek concept that has now become real. That Alison Bechdel, who is authors at Cartoon Strip and also wrote a play called Fun Home.
Funhouse.
Funhouse?
Oh, wait, no, you're right. Fun Home.
She had this thing called the Bechdel test, obviously named for her. And the idea is that because movies tend to feature men and treat women like handmaidens and accessories and sort of romantic objects and, essentially what he thinks, which is basically, our ovaries and uterus are the only things that actually matter so we can reproduce the species and satisfy their every whim. What she says is take a look at a movie and see, are there at least two women characters featured as opposed to someone who just walks by and is like waitress number 3? Are there two female characters who actually have roles and names? Secondly, do these women speak to each other? And thirdly, when they speak to each other, is it ever not about a man? And shockingly, this is the norm in movies. And so what I think with JD Vance, you can, this is his view of the world. He's got 3 categories of women. He's got, he's got the girls, he's got, the, young women, and then the menopausal or postmenopausal women.
Yeah, actually, Jen,
I won't get to that, but I was just saying.
I have a clip, so
do you
I can play it anytime.
Okay, one second. Let me just go back to your thing. But with regard to this, he knows that women are thinking and not obsessed, weirdly, about abortion, because it's his view that even if a child or woman who isn't a child is raped or a victim of incest, including a rape, that they should be forced to give birth, carry the rapist's child to term, because otherwise, on balance, the inconvenience having to do this and the violence of a birth that you don't want to actually go forward with, apparently that's a mere inconvenience. If you look at every single thing he says, and you're going to play this clip, every single thing he says, women should not be part of public life. Our job is to be handmaidens. There you go.
And if you've got a cat, watch out.
Can I ask a question? Quick question?
Perhaps. Yeah.
What the hell why are you asking a man what suburban women think? Why not ask him what a tree thinks? That's about as relevant. That's the most inconsequential, disingenuous, hypocritical question I've ever seen on.
I mean, look who's asking it, though, Brian.
Yeah,
I mean, that's her. That's her.
But that's
brief.
part of it too. I mean, I don't wake up in the morning and say, "What should men in America be doing today?" But
I do, because there are a lot of things men in America should be. But let's look at the.
I ask that question every morning.
Then discuss it on the other side.
Well, I'm telling you.
And sort of see the effect it has on him to be around them. Like, they spoil him. There's sort of all the classic stuff that grandparents do to grandchildren.
Children's
but
grandma.
It makes him a much better human being to have exposure to his grandparents.
Well, I don't know.
And the evidence on this, by the way, is like super clear.
That's the whole purpose of the postmenopausal female in theory. Did your in-laws, and particularly your mother-in-law, show up in some huge way?
She lived with us for a year.
Right.
So,
So I didn't know the answer to that.
Right. No,
because that's this weird unadvertised feature of marrying an Indian woman.
No, it's in some ways the most transgressive thing I've ever done against sort of the hyper neoliberal approach to work and family. My wife had this baby 7 weeks before she started the clerkship. It was still not sleeping any more than an hour and a half in a given interval. And her mom just took a sabbatical. She's a biology professor in California. Just took a sabbatical for a year and came and lived with us and took care of our kid for a year.
Okay,
so it was just one of these things where it's like, this is what you do.
So a biology professor, PhD,
yes,
drops what they're doing, to immediately tend to the needs of a new mother with her infant.
Painfully economically inefficient. Right?
Can I just propose?
Like why didn't she just keep her job, give us part of the wages to pay somebody else to do it, right? Because that is the thing that the hyper liberalized economics wants you to do. The economic logic of always prioritizing paid wage labor over other forms of contributing to a society is to me, it's actually a consequence of a sort of fundamental liberalism that is ultimately going to unwind and collapse upon itself.
It has to.
I think it's the abandonment of a sort of Aristotelian virtue politics for a hyper market oriented way of thinking about what's good and what's desirable.
Verbal diarrhea.
Okay, so if good tip for public speakers: if you ever find yourself floundering in your own stupidity, just throw out a word like Aristotelian, and that will make people think you're smart. So much wrong. The misogyny. Well, mostly just the misogyny, but the racism, the classism. Because, by the way, last I checked, if you go on sabbatical, you still get paid.
Hey, I left. I was a stay-at-home dad for 5 years. For
Monster.
the love of God,
Brian, so you're upending your gender role. How dare you?
What is this crap? You're married. You have children. You both work together. You find a way to make it work. This guy is simply classifying women below. It's as a guy, this pisses me off because this is everything. This is the kind of macho bullshit attitude. They're really beta males who cannot stand up to the fact that they own what they do, and they are so damn illiterate and so emotionally unstable that they have to force women into a role to lift themselves up without being able at any point in time to be a rational human being, and more importantly, a cogent, rational adult. Screw him. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think one of the well, let me, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Donald was allegedly giving a speech about the economy. I just want to show you. Here's hand model Donald Trump trying to explain inflation by holding up a regular sized package of TikToks and a Donald's hand sized package of TikToks. And it was about inflation, which, by the way, is down to pre-2021 levels. Thanks, President Biden. But like advanced age of presidential candidates, I'm sure we'll never hear anything about that again. But my point here is, Dahlia, that while Donald is allowed to be completely policy free, we see, headlines about Kamala Harris like, it's all a mystery. Nobody knows what she stands for. She hasn't defined, blah, 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 which is just absurd. I mean, she's in the Biden-Harris administration, so we have some inkling. And, she's hasn't put a foot wrong yet. So there's that hypocrisy. But then, as we've seen in the first clip we saw of Vance and other remarks he's made, he's articulating the policies on the right. And just because he's weird and creepy and the worst vice presidential pick in American history doesn't mean that we shouldn't be paying attention to what he's saying. He's all in on Project 2025, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't know if folks saw this because it literally just dropped this story about, I don't know how to say his name. Is it Russell Vogt?
I do not know.
Russell, whatever he is, who's one of the authors of Project 2025, just like gave an interview in a 5-star DC hotel to guys he thought were going to be wealthy funders who were in fact just Project Veritasing his ass. And they recorded him essentially very candidly saying, this is what we're doing, and talking about how he's drafted, hundreds of executive orders. There's an entire, shadow plan. And that, of course, Trump has to disavow it. But, it's clear that Project 2025 is, in fact, his baby. And then there's this amazing line where he starts talking about Donald's plan to carry out the largest deportation in U.S. history, sending millions of undocumented immigrants away to, quote, help save the country. This is what he says in this interview. It's astounding. Once deportations begin, quote, you're really going to be winning a debate about what that looks like. And so that's going to cause us to get off multiculturalism just to be able to sustain and defend the deportation. Like, he genuinely thinks that he can get America to stop thinking about multiculturalism by just deporting millions of people. That's how they think. Like, they literally are so binary. It reminds me, this is the anniversary this week of the Nazis who marched through my hometown of Charlottesville in 2017. And literally this idea that you are being replaced by people, and if you can just send them somewhere else, America can go back to being a John Wayne movie. And it's just so fatuous and so silly. And so when you play JD Vance, Mary, like, you know, longing for the biblical days of, like, you know, like handmaids and you know, fecund women and like the children that they squeeze out. Like, I just laugh that these guys are such clownish.
But wait, but the olden days of the Old Testament, when women were litigators at white shoe law firms and biology professors. What?
Who, by the way, can afford to take a year off and not be penalized, unlike any woman in America, right? Like, no woman in America has the luxury of just strolling away for a year to take care of the grandkids, or to stroll away for a little while so that you can pretend that you support your husband's campaign where he doesn't like working women. Like, I just want to be super clear about what I'm saying, which is, this is, you know, JD Vance is like a stupid person's idea of what a smart person sounds like. Mm-hmm. And this is a stupid, stupid notion that we can take America back to its greatness by doing undoable things.
That's a racist statement, by the way. Make America great again. Take it back to when it was great in the 50s, when women, children, minorities, LGBTQ were treated. That is the most racist statement you can make. Every time I hear someone say MAGA, I go immediately to racism, because great for who? Who's it great for? It certainly wasn't great for my grandfather. It certainly wasn't great for my grandmother. Certainly wasn't great for any of our friends or family members. This is all bullshit. And, you know, at the end of the day, what is infuriating is not just the stupidity. Honestly, Mary and Dahlia and Jen, at some point in time, I think the next step for that campaign is for Vance and Trump to stand up on stage and beat their chest and give out the Tarzan yell. And by the way, Carol Burnett did that better than they could anyway. But but what the misogyny and hypocrisy work hand in hand. For example, they go after they go after Harris and say that she's not been out there, she has no policies. Yet at the same time, every day I'm getting statements from the Donald Trump administration. That's their term. I'm getting emails from the Trump organization saying that she's responsible for everything that Biden has done, that she's the one who did this, she's the one who did that, while at the same time they're arguing she has no policies. Well, which is it, right, fellas? Which bullshit lie do you want me to buy today? Because I think this is also indicative of the fact that they're imploding. And God bless, I hope they continue their implosion.
Well, yeah, and part of the implosion is based on what Dahlia was mentioning before, this extraordinarily black and white view of the world. They don't understand nuance. They have literally no insight into themselves. They don't get why other people think they're weird, for example. So they just, their counter is, no, you are. And there's just nowhere to go from having the kind of entrenched reductive positions they continue to have that are never, and this is like Donald in a nutshell, like never able to analyze new facts on the ground to adjust. And I think that also like it leads to this level of like immaturity. And part of the problem is that he in particular is allowed to get away with no specificity. He doesn't have to back anything up. And there's a clip that sort of combines both of the things I just mentioned that I mean, it's not necessarily the most important thing, but it's going to make you laugh. And it to me is a perfect exemplar of who he is and why the media's response to him is so appallingly bad. If we could check that out.
I know Putin very well. I got along with him very well. He respected me, and it's just one of those things. And we would talk a lot about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye. But I said, don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. You can't do it, Vladimir. You do it, it's going to be a bad day. You cannot do it. And I told him things that what I do, and he said, no way. And I said, way.
Way. I think the last time I heard anybody say that, I was like 11.
Yeah, middle schoolyard shit. No way, man, way.
But like that's his campaign. Dictators love me.
Yes.
Vladimir Putin respects me. Also, by the way, Elon, great audio quality. You totally nailed it. Please keep doing that. So again, not the most important thing, but there also, Jen, are instances in which inadvertently Donald does tell us stuff about, what he plans to do in certain extremely important aspects of our lives that will have an impact on us. On the one hand, we know that he's trying to take credit for President Biden's reduction or capping, I should say, insulin costs, which is fabulous that that's happening, but it's Donald Trump had absolutely nothing to do with it. And now we know that President Biden has just done the same for many other important life-saving drugs, including asthma inhalers. Could you please get on that? Because I just spent $740 on my inhaler yesterday, and I do not know how people. Anyway, that's obscene. So thank you, President Biden. So, on the one hand, we have Donald trying to take credit for good things that he had nothing to do with and would never do because he's beholden to the pharmaceutical industry. And then again, once in a while, we have him telling us exactly what he will do if he's back in power and he has to answer to his oligarch buddies. Sorry, here we go.
One last question.
Go ahead.
Entitlements ever be on your plate?
At some point they will be. We have tremendous growth. We're going to have tremendous growth. This next year, it'll be toward the end of the year. The growth is going to be incredible. And at the right time, we will take a look at that. That's actually the easiest of all things, if you look, because it's such a big
willing
percentage.
to do some of
If you don't cut something in entitlements, you'll never really deal with the debt.
We'll be cutting, but we're also going to have growth like you've never had before.
You changed your outlook on how to handle entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Mr. President? It seems like something has to be done, or else we're going to be stuck at 120% of debt to GDP forever.
So first of all, there is a lot you can do in terms of entitlements, in terms of cutting. And
Oops, sorry. Technical difficulties, as in I wasn't paying attention. No, I'm kidding. I clicked on the wrong clip. But anyway, that's what he's going to do. And again, it's sort of a mix of things. It's like, how exactly are we going to have growth? Like, what exactly are you going to be doing? And also incredible, as in not credible.
So, here's how I look at it and how I always have. If we're going to have, generally speaking, a market economy where we allow businesses to essentially organize labor, despite the fact that we have labor unions, and distribute products and services with a profit motive, in other words, kind of capitalism, the only way to blunt or mitigate the major downsides of capitalism is through two things, which is government policy, including entitlements and things like free higher education and so on. And the second way is using tax policy like the child tax credit to redistribute. And this idea that, you could have growth, so much growth in the society and in the economy that you wouldn't need entitlements is exactly backwards. But it makes sense that he doesn't understand anything about economics at all, given that this is the man who, I think you may know this, Mary, has run so many businesses into the ground, including several casinos, that he shouldn't even be allowed to participate in the private sector, let alone ever get back into the Oval Office.
And honestly, anybody who equates the U.S. Treasury with his own money, like he literally acts as if every dollar the American government spends is coming out of his own pocket. He like reminds me of my grandfather that way. So cheap, so grasping. It's just nobody like that should be trusted. Like I've never thought that, being a business person was a prerequisite for being in higher office, because the American economy is not like a business at all. It doesn't run like a business. It doesn't run like a corporation. So it's a ridiculous analogy. It is not a requirement. But Dahlia, let's shift to something else that, is not getting covered. And it's sort of the stealth danger to the election. We saw it in 2020, but they're going to be better organized. We're seeing fake electors being set up already. We're seeing the overtaking of local polling places by election deniers, et cetera. So if you could walk us through what's happening in Georgia, because I think that's sort of a template for other things we need to be worried about.
Yeah, I think, I feel like this is me channeling like Waj and Danielle and the people who are like, but you think everything's good, but it's really bad. And here's why. Like, I don't want to be the Eeyore at the party, but I do think.
Dahlia, just really quickly, I want to catch you up. Last week on the show, or maybe it was Tuesday, I remember, time means nothing. Danielle was both happy and optimistic.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Well,
so, there's an opening for an Eeyore.
I will be texting her. But I just think, there's kind of two things happening at the same time, and they're pulling in opposite directions. And one thing is we're all drunk on Walz and Harris and the just energy and the joy and the power and the like absolute astonishing fact that hope is in fact a political action. Like we thought it was a feeling, right? It's a tactic, and being hopeless is a tactic, and fomenting hopelessness is a tactic, and fomenting hope is also a tactic. And that's all tremendous. And the polling and everything else and the enthusiasm and the door knocking reflects that. There's another thing happening, which you just flicked at, Mary, that is really scary. And as you said, because it kind of kills our buzz, it's getting relegated to sort of like page 7. And that is, there is still going to be a determined, coherent effort to say this election was stolen. And no matter what happens, no matter what the margins are, no matter what, whether it's a blowout or not, we are seeing really efforts to harden what didn't work in 2020 with state electors, with hand counting, right? In Georgia, we're seeing a whole array of behaviors that would essentially let Georgia do what Georgia couldn't do, right, in 2020. And I would just commend to people, there's a really good piece in Slate today, just sort of laying out all the prongs of that, what's happening with the Board of Elections, what's happening in terms of efforts to, have hand counting, what's happening in terms of even the actual certification, which is just a formalism, is going to turn into a fight. And I say all of that because it's not just Georgia. It's happening around the country. Georgia's kind of the lowest manifestation of it. But I just think we have to be very, very mindful that winning the election is exactly half the battle. And the other half the battle is going to be what's happening in states. And Mary, it's so important what you're saying in terms of voter intimidation, in terms of poll workers, who are terrified to be Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, right? At every single level, there is going to be denialism, and it will probably be violent denialism. And as you said, it's going to be better than last time because they know why it didn't work last time. So I just want folks to be not hopeless, but mindful that whatever happens in November is the first chapter. And that brings us, I'll just say very quickly, Mary, to the US Supreme Court, because you asked me initially. I feel like the US Supreme Court that batted away these challenges, these claims that the election had been stolen in 2020, I am much less confident this time that the Supreme Court is on board for that.
Yeah, there's every reason not to be confident about that. So I think that, first of all, putting hope and enthusiasm and energy as tactics is very vital way of looking at what's happening right now, because as you point out, the converse is always true. And that is why for 4 years now, even though we had the best president in my lifetime doing extraordinary things under extraordinary circumstances, it still felt so awful, because the worst person in American history still had power and was making more inroads. That fucking guy is more popular now than he was 4 years ago and than he was 8 years ago. How is that possible? So it's been really demoralizing. All of a sudden, Kamala Harris opens a window and it was just transformative. So, what Donald Trump and the Republican Party have done to us was sort of a spotlight was shone upon that, and suddenly it's like, oh, wait a second, we have our version of that, and we need it. We desperately needed it, Brian, because you cannot live in dark shadows without any sense of possibility forever. I mean, that's how fascism thrives, right? At the same time, though, obviously, we need to pay attention to the dangers facing us. Otherwise, we're going to keep having this fight, and nobody wants to do that. It's unsustainable to keep doing this every 4 years. So I think on the one hand, the good news is that it's President Biden's DOJ in charge now, which should give us some measure of hope. But again, a lot of these things are happening at the local level. And, Dahlia said that one of the problems we're facing is that election workers, and a lot of those positions are voluntary, by the way, it's no longer a safe thing to do. And that's insane, because 8 years ago, whoever thought, oh, I want to volunteer to help out at the polling place, but I'm afraid I'm going to get killed or swatted. Whoever had to think like that before? Why? This is probably
Russia.
a stupid question, but where's the corporate media on this? Because it's like so
Bingo.
Incredibly important.
Now we fail in so many ways, and we fail mostly because we've been bought out and there are no local media anymore. There's vast news deserts, so community journalism doesn't exist. And the government has been, I've said this before, complicit in it. Here's a perfect example. Donald Trump is supposedly having a press conference today. Who do you think is going to be at that press conference? Ain't going to be me. I applied for credentials and they denied me credentials. And in nice big red letters, denied. Why? Because Donald Trump doesn't want to face the questions, the hard questions. And since we don't cover things like that, and we do cover Donald Trump as if he's a sideshow, and we miss the nuance and we miss the fact that things are going on wrong, there has been very little reporting done about this. But there are there were people who were convicted and sided with those who were involved in the January 6th insurrection, election deniers, who are now sitting on election boards locally in some of these toss-up states. And I do have faith in the DOJ, but I think you have to have that local grassroots level. And to your point, who the hell wants to volunteer to count votes when somebody's going to stick a gun to your head? And you have to have a real love for democracy, A, and B, you have to have the wherewithal of a Marine, because these people are simply out of control. Now, I firmly believe, and Dahlia, I'll throw in with those with hope. I don't think that there's any reason to live without hope. If I have no hope, what the hell am I doing here? And to be realistic about it, I think that this is, if done correctly, and if the Democrats do this correctly, it's a fine line to walk. through November. But if done correctly, I do believe it's the end of the MAGA movement, because it will lose money. And that is where the Republicans need to be to sustain themselves. But to do that, folks, don't take my word for it. Read Project 2025, see what it's all about, and do support. And here's a plug for the Mary Trump Media Network. Do support independent efforts at supplying you news, because we have failed. The mainstream, and I don't say mainstream, I call it corporate. The corporate media has failed. With twice the number of people on this planet as on the day I was born, and a quarter of a number of reporters, we simply are not getting the job done. It's all about clickbait. It's all about money. Everything we do is about money. If you want to find out the information going into the November general elections, do the work yourself. You owe yourself that much, because it's all on the line.
And, like Brian said, there are places to get actual information that can help you, like
community
here.
newspapers. If you've got them, use them.
Yeah, local newspapers, absolutely, and us. And speaking of which, because I always forget to ask, please click subscribe. We are like this close to having 100,000 subscribers. And
hey,
when that happens, I don't know. We got to think of something. I'm not sure, but we'll be. How about this? We'll be happy. that's always nice. So yeah, click that subscribe button. And Jen, part of the problem is that in addition to all the nefarious and illicit tactics that are being used, voter subversion is something that Donald is doing every day. The election's rigged. Why vote? The election's rigged. They're going to cheat it, blah, blah, blah. Which is dangerous. All the stuff Dahlia spoke to, Brian spoke to. But then there's the nefarious and illicit. Like, for example, in Texas, they are closing a polling place, one of the largest polling places at the University of Texas in Austin. And for those of you who don't know, Austin tends to be the bluest place in Texas. So that's happening too, Jen. So, and I mean, I personally think that that's news that people would be interested in.
They don't want college kids
to
and
by the way, of course not. I just want to point out that Mercedes mentioned in the chat that when she lived in Georgia, she never voted. It never took fewer than 5 hours to vote. With the exception of 2016, I've never waited more than 5 minutes to vote in my life, because I live in New York City.
Yeah, I've never waited for more than 5 minutes to vote because.
And I'm white.
I live in a white suburban area, so there are plenty of places to vote, and they don't usually switch around our voting locations. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important, especially for students at UC Austin, to know this, so that the student groups can help organize. Maybe the school has shuttle services in between parts of the campus. I mean, they need to know, and this is something that is important. I also want to say, just tying back to something you said earlier, Mary, when Donald gave that speech in North Carolina at a shockingly small venue that wasn't even full of 2,500 people, or maybe it was around thereabouts, claiming that it was him and not Harris and Biden who had secured the $35 a month cap on insulin, which is a life changer. Why wasn't it on the front page of every newspaper? Donald Trump lies about insulin prices. This is an outright lie. You can say it was intentional because he knows it wasn't him. There's no shading this. And this is such a dangerous thing to be repeated, because a lot of people, shockingly, get their news from YouTube. And that's why we're here, by the way. And they're going to hear this repeated and repeated. And so it needs to be a front page story, so that people like us, other podcasters, it actually penetrates and people go, oh, that's a top story. When the major news outlets, the corporate media, whether it's television or print, fail to treat something as monumental as that lie as a lead story, then it trickles down, and then a lot of people, unlike us, don't bring it up.
Yeah, and I think too, Oh, first of all, yeah, Brian keeps mentioning that he's getting emails from Donald's campaign. So am I. Like all of a sudden, I'm like, who sold my email address? Because that's
what I want to
offensive.
know.
And it's things like Hillsdale College and Liberty University. I'm like, hey, waste your time emailing me, I guess. But
I just got
whatever.
invited to be one of his advisors.
Yeah. I want to mention this because I know it sort of freaks a lot of people out. Very often, the videos you see during the Nerd Avengers or during our other videos are Donald Trump or surrogates raising money for his campaign. We have nothing to do with that. We have no control over that. It's just the algorithm. It kind of makes sense because he stole my name. So it just kind of like people associate us for some bizarre reason.
Can I just jump in and say, and that's why
please.
it's free. Like if you want to watch this show, we can't help it. It's a free subscription. The ads are coming through. We cannot choose what ads come through. Oh, well, you can laugh at those ads.
Yeah, because they are, and most of the time you can skip them after 5 seconds. So just like plug your ears and then skip them
or
immediately.
Upgrade to premium.
Mercedes just made a great point. One of the reasons to embrace that is because they are wasting money by advertising on our channel because nobody watching those ads here, almost 100,000 of you, is going to donate to his campaign. So Donald, brilliant.
Give him a reason to vote against him.
Brilliant strategizing.
Can I say one quick thing just in response to something really smart that Jen said? I think that one of the mistakes, if we're all just going to do beat down on corporate media, I would put at the top of the Christmas tree, like the angel of this, is we are dealing with someone who lies habitually. And here we are 8 years in, and we are still fighting about how to fact check him. And the fact that we are like, as though there is no possible technological, physical, intellectual solution, right? And so we keep having these like, oh, I guess he shouldn't be allowed to debate unless, someone can fact check him. But there's no conceivable way in which that could happen, says the media. And so then they just let him go. And I just want to say what Jen is talking about is an utterly pointless learned helplessness on the part of a media that has decided we can't fact check him in real time, either because our reporters aren't smart enough or because we don't have the technology, whatever it is.
It's money.
And therefore we won't. We'll just let him talk.
Yes,
that's
because it's money. Dahlia, I've been in these meetings. Now, I have been in meetings where the discussion about fact checking him has occurred. And at the end of the day, they let it go. Just push back on the very basic things. I'm not talking about a bank of 6 or 8 people fact checking him all the time. When he says something like, Vladimir Putin has my respect, well, why would we want his respect? Or if he says he can solve the problems in Ukraine between the election day and the day he's inaugurated, one simple word: how? I'm talking about being a reporter. I'm talking about asking questions. You really don't even have to fact check him. You just have to do, and this is, my big thing is going back to one of my mentors who was in the White House. And she told me, Brian, it doesn't matter if they answer the question. It doesn't matter how the question is answered. It matters if you ask the question. So just ask the question. Do not listen to what he's saying and follow up. You don't have to take a stance against him. Ask him to explain himself. That's what a reporter does. That's what we're not doing. It's you call it, Jen, it's the Socratic method, but to me, it's the institution of the scientific method of journalism, finding vetted facts and holding people accountable. And we don't do it. And it's because we're incapable of thinking past money. Letting him makes us money.
I think there's also something that precedes all of that, and it's how he's framed at the very outset. He's a traitor.
Yeah.
He's spread the big lie, so he's an election subverter. He's stolen, and I'm not going to say allegedly. We saw him do it. He admitted it. He just said it wasn't what we saw. He stole highly classified sensitive documents that belong to the American government / people. He's an adjudicated rapist. He's adjudicated business fraud. He's been found guilty of 34 felony counts. I don't know. Maybe we just have to come up with like a catchy limerick to encapsulate all of that. But that's the beginning of the conversation. Unless you say that I don't care about just going straight to what are your policy positions, to the extent that he can answer that question, that legitimizes him. That was the problem I had putting him on the stage with President Biden in the first place. You put him on that stage, you're legitimizing him, you're legitimizing his candidacy. And it gets even worse if we're told, to Dahlia's point, yeah, can't fact check him though during the debate. That's for his opponent. How do you fact check somebody who lies 2 times a minute? How do you fact check somebody who's not answering the question he was asked? And I just, because then even if there's a human being capable of pushing back in real time, it becomes he said, who knows? President Biden says that blue states aren't allowing women and doctors to murder babies, but Donald says they do allow that. So I don't know. You need an objective third person to draw a line in the sand and say that is a lie. It's going to be fascinating if Donald has the guts to show up on September 10th for their first debate. It's going to be fascinating to see how prosecutor Kamala Harris handles it. Speaking of Kamala Harris, she and President Biden are appearing together in Maryland at 1:30 Eastern. That's today. So it's going to be amazing to see. Will corporate media cover that? Or will they only cover Donald's staged event or so-called press conference? It's so funny, like how Kamala Harris seems to be running Donald's campaign, because she won't give a press conference. Why should she? She's kicking everybody's ass. So he's starting to give them as if like that makes him better than she is somehow, even though of course they're not really press conferences. Anyway, his is at 4:30 at his friggin' golf club, of course. Yes, Brad.
Well, there's you mentioned the what they're doing today. I just want to this is Harris running his campaign again today. This just came from the Harris Walz campaign. For planning purposes, reluctantly, as it is sent to me. Today, Donald Trump to ramble incoherently and spread dangerous lies in public, but at different home. Today at 4:30 p.m., Donald J. Trump, loser of the 2020 election by 7 million votes, will hold another public meltdown in Bedminster, New Jersey. Venue, not a battleground state. I love the comment. It's just beautiful.
I mean, Dahlia, they're finally doing it. It's just, I mean, that's also a source of the joy, right?
Well, and the final line. I want to give, there's a lot, but the one, these remarks will not be artificial intelligence, but they certainly will lack intelligence. I can't help it. I laughed.
No, it's great, Dahlia.
There's something so powerful about I keep saying every time I read one of these kind of smackdowns, I laugh. I'm like, it's a poem made of razors. Like, it's so, they're very subtle. They're very funny. It never veers into the sort of utterly vicious hatefulness in which Donald trades. It's just this kind of like gentle chiding, like Coach Tim says, you're a loser. Like, it's very clever. And I think, we keep using the word joy. I don't know if people have seen that like Estrella video where like Kamala like talks to the little girl and holds her face in her hands. I agree, Jen. It's a like 5 hanky thing, but it's just stunning to me how rare it is in public office to see somebody center someone else. Like, this whole video is shot from behind the vice president's head. You never see her face. You just see her holding this child's little cheeks in her hand and saying like, promise me you'll respect yourself and demand that it's an astounding thing that lands like as a kick in the gut, because we have become so famished, so parched, not just for like other centering, but for just basic kindness.
Yep.
And like laughter, but also just the ability to talk to children in a way that one would want someone to talk to your children if you're not a, childless cat lady postmenopausal. And I just think like every time she does one of these deft little moves, which is actually not a move because it's who she is,
right,
it just lands like an earthquake because we're so unused to it.
Yeah, and it gives the rest of us permission to realize that what we were missing and be full of, I don't know, it's a complicated series of emotions, but certainly joy, it's relief, it's like the kind of relief you feel when you've been trapped in a dungeon for 20 years and you finally get out in the sunlight again. You hear the kind of knee weakening relief. It's giving us permission to feel that and reconceptualize the context in which not just this election is playing out, but in which we're living. And that's really important, because the other thing they're so brilliantly doing is creating the contrast between what Kamala Harris and Tim Walton are doing. Let's focus on Kamala Harris. Between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, can you ever imagine Donald making a gesture that genuine, that generous? He's like, if to the extent that he could even kneel down, he would kneel down and say to that child, don't ever forget, you need to respect me. You need to give yourself over entirely to me because I feel bad about things and you need to make me feel better. So it's very powerful, just in human psychological terms. They're hitting all of the right notes, and there is literally no need for her to kowtow to corporate media. She'll give a press conference when it suits her. She will sit down for one interview when it suits her. What she's doing is working. And also this is these are the same people like insulting her now are the same people who treated Joe Biden like dirt for a very long time. They're the same people who've been propping Donald Trump up for 8 or 9 years now. Why should she have to give into that at all? Jen, I have a flash quiz for you. Do you remember Liz Truss?
I do. The lettuce lady?
The lettuce lady. Yes.
Also known as a prime minister, right?
Let's explain. Liz Truss was indeed the prime minister of Great Britain for less time than it took, because I think it was like day one in her administration. People already started placing bets on when she would have to resign. So some clever person, I sadly don't know, decided to have a video of a head of lettuce. And the contest was, which will last longer, Liz Truss's prime ministership or the head of lettuce? Well, Jen, she's back, not as prime minister, but she's back stumping for Donald Trump. Like, what is it with these right-wing Brits who think that we actually need to hear what they have to say about our elections? But I want to show you in other news.
She's nostalgic, like the Brexit days brought him in,
I guess so. I want to show you a clip of something terribly amusing that happened.
I support Trump and I want him to win.
What a crowd.
But and I think it's what I was saying a bit about incumbents. I think the average American is not doing well. And
doing better than you, baby.
I think it was Bill Clinton's advisor who said it's the economy's stupid. So I think that he will probably win.
On that.
I've got a load of Trump questions, by the way. But
That's no idea where that's come from.
Holy crap.
Run away! Run away! Run away! Yes, the 4 people in the audience are really going to miss you. Yes, Dahlia, it did indeed look like open mic night at your kid's middle school. I just want to thank all of the petty people out there because that was fabulous. And we need more of that. Honestly, like to Dahlia's point, what the Harris Walls campaign is doing is deft and sometimes subtle and still very funny, and the stuff is landing. However, the rest of us don't have to be subtle. The rest of us can just mock these people, especially Donald mercilessly because that's what they deserve. So I don't know. I thought that was hysterical, and I also felt it was like a marching order for the rest of us and how to handle the rest. I think we're down to 82 days, people. Woo! Anyway, I thank you so much for being here, everybody. We love your comments and we so appreciate your support. Please, again, don't forget to click on that subscribe button. It's very important that we get subscribers because it increases our ability to reach people. And it is crunch time. And the Nerd Avengers are people whose voices are crucially important, especially now. So thank you. You can also like episodes, share them with people you think might be interested in them. And as always, we have content dropping every day. And that's what happens when you click subscribe. You don't have to pay anything. You just get alerted whenever we have new videos dropping, which is 7 days a week now, sometimes several times a day. So be sure to look for our other shows. Morning Gen is every morning now at 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. Brian's Reverse Shot is on Saturdays at 2. Also, everything's Eastern, so I'll stop saying it. I have my Rapid Response, which is now at 10, 2, and 6 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. Democracy-ish, Danielle Moody's Get Woke, Ali Samarco's America Show, all sorts of amazing stuff coming down the pike. And we're gonna keep bringing you as much as we can. We're gonna live stream events as we can. So Brian, Jen, Dahlia, thank you as always for being here. Dahlia in particular, it was so good to see you today. We've
Glad you're safe, Dahlia.
Really missed you. And we hope we get to see you more often. And that is it for our show today. I think it's Thursday. Who knows? Yeah, Thursday. We'll pretend. So, again, my Rapid Response coming later today, Jen's Morning Gen, Brian's new episode of Reverse Shot on Saturday. So we will see you then. In the meantime, two quick things. The convention is next week. So there's going to be lots going on, and we're gonna get swag. So so we will keep you posted on all of the happenings. Also, I just shout out to Mercedes. I am so sorry I stressed you out today. It won't happen again. Of course it will. Anyway, thanks everybody. It's great to be here with you. We'll see you soon. In the meantime, please stay safe and be kind.